Hi friends, and welcome to this video on how I got an A star in OCR-A A-level chemistry. If you are a returning subscriber, welcome back. It's so good to see you again. And if you are discovering my channel for the first time, welcome to the family. My name is Deep, and I'm about to start my second year studying biology at the University of Oxford. And my mission with this academic empowerment project is to inspire, empower, support, cheerlead, and celebrate you on your journey of showing up for yourself and turning your dreams and goals into reality. Okay, so a lot of people do not like A-level chemistry, and that is because it can get quite difficult to understand. However, A-level chemistry was one of my favorite subjects to revise for when it came to A-levels, because once I put in the effort to understand the content, it was so much more smooth sailing than my other subjects, which was OCR-A A-level biology and Edexcel English literature. And this is because of two reasons. First, OCR-A A-level chemistry has a lot less content than OCR-A A-level biology. And secondly, because it was a science, for me it was easier to revise for compared to A-level English literature. So I guess one key idea I wanted to emphasize in this video is if you're finding something difficult to understand in A-level chemistry, please do not give up. Put in the effort to understand the topic. Go to your textbook, go to your teachers, ask your friends, go to YouTube, and put in the effort to find an explanation that makes sense to you. Because once you have that understanding, A-level chemistry can become so much more easy and fun and more smooth sailing than some other subjects potentially. Also, your understanding will be the foundation to your success in A-level chemistry. It's what's going to allow you to be successful and get the marks in the application questions and eventually get that A star. Okay, so what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go through the entire learning system I used to get an A star in OCR-A A-level chemistry, and this can be divided into 4 key stages. The first stage was pre-studying, the second stage was my main learning sessions, which is when I did the majority of my learning, and this was through attending my lessons, doing my homework, and creating my flashcards, which I use Quizlet for. The third stage was spaced repetition, and I did this through reviewing my flashcards by importing my flashcards into Anki and then reviewing my flashcards in Anki every single day. And then the fourth stage was doing exam questions and learning from them. Not just doing my exam questions and leaving them, but analysing my performance and my answers and coming up with strategies that I could implement moving forwards to get more marks and do better. So that's that. And initially this was in the form of doing topic question packs on physics and math tutor, and then during A-level exam season this was in the form of doing full pass papers. Okay, let's start off with pre-studying, which is one of the biggest things that changed the game for me when it came to A-level chemistry, especially in year 13 when the content became a lot more difficult. Pre-studying is when you begin learning about a topic before you have a lesson on it. And for me, for OCR-A A-level chemistry, what this looked like was reading the relevant textbook pages beforehand and also watching the relevant Allery Chemistry YouTube videos about those topics and really trying to understand the concepts they were talking about and processing them. And the reason why this helped me so much was because it meant that when I showed up to my A-level chemistry lessons, I already had a pretty decent big picture understanding of the topic, the key concepts involved, how they relate to each other, why they were important, why the overall topic was important, and what other topics it's related to, which meant that during my 1-hour A-level chemistry lessons, I didn't get overwhelmed and confused because I was receiving so much new and unfamiliar information. Instead, it meant that a lot of the information that was being introduced, I already had familiarity with, which meant that I was actually able to follow along with the lesson and what my teachers were saying, which saved me a lot of stress. And this also meant that I could use my lessons to really clarify, consolidate, and refine my understanding. And I did this in 3 main ways. Firstly, my teachers would often explain the concepts in different ways to the textbook and the Allery Chemistry videos. And comparing the different way these different sources and people would explain the topic in my head helped me find the links between those explanations, identify the key principles, and doing that really helped things click in my head and deepened my understanding. Secondly, having that foundational understanding from pre-studying the topic beforehand meant that I could spend a lot more time in my lessons asking questions to my teachers and friends about the things I was still confused about and didn't really understand, which saved me a lot of time, which I would otherwise spend trying to find those answers online, which would have taken a lot more time. Finally, having that pre-study done meant that for some lessons, I was a little bit ahead. It meant that I understood the topic a little bit better, I could finish the practice questions a little bit earlier, and so I had the time and opportunity to try and explain and teach the certain aspects of the topics to my friends or just to myself, which again really helped me consolidate my understanding and also identify gaps in my knowledge. Okay, so now let's move on to what I did when I attended my A-level chemistry lessons. And our A-level chemistry lessons were structured in this way. Our teachers would often explain the topic through using a PowerPoint and or drawing on the whiteboard, and we would have opportunities during the lesson to ask questions and also do practice questions as well. And during my lessons, I did everything I just talked about in the previous section, and I also made my in-class notes. And these were pretty simple. They were just simple linear notes that I wrote up in a lined exercise book with the key things our teachers said, talked about, drew, included in their whiteboards and PowerPoints, and other notes and annotations that helped me understand the concepts better. And making these notes were really helpful because my teachers often explained the topic in a way that made a lot of sense to me. The additional pieces of information that I learned during the lessons and the annotations and notes that I made from that really helped deepen my understanding and help make things click. And also because our teachers would often provide us with key marking points or exam technique strategies to use when answering those questions about that topic, which would help me get a lot of marks in the future. If I ever had any questions during the lessons, I would try and ask those questions as soon as possible during those lessons so that I could easily follow along with the rest of the lesson. If I wasn't able to ask my questions, or if some other questions came up after the lesson, what I would do is I would either email my teacher or stay behind and ask my questions then, or I would visit my teachers during break time or lunchtime. If after asking those questions, I still didn't understand their explanation and answers, what I would do is I would ask my friends, go to other teachers, go to the textbook or the Adderall Chemistry YouTube videos, or other online resources like alevelchemistry.co.uk, Chem Guide, Save My Exams, etc. The key thing being was that I didn't stop until I understood the topic properly, because I didn't want to try and brute force memorize information. Most of the times when I did stop though was if I realized that the question I asked about didn't cover content that was on the specification, or covered content that was on the specification but to a depth which I didn't need to know for A-level chemistry. And after my lessons, what I would do is I would just do the homework our teachers assigned us, because they were great ways to apply what we learned, consolidate my understanding, review what I learned, identify knowledge gaps and weaknesses, and sometimes even prepare me for the topics we were going to cover in later lessons. Okay, so now let's move on to the next stage in my learning system, which was creating my flashcards. So when I made my flashcards varied. Sometimes I made my flashcards on the same day or same week of having covered a topic or subtopic within a module in class. Other times I waited until we finished the entire subtopic or topic before making my flashcards. It really just depended on how busy I was and when I was able to make time for it. The key thing though was that I tried to complete all the flashcards that I needed to go over and that covered all the content 2 weeks before we had our end of topic tests for each topic. So that would give me enough time to begin reviewing them. And I created my flashcards using my textbook, my notes from lessons, explanations from YouTube and other online resources that I found helpful, and then also the mark scheme, the key marking points from physics and from the physics and math tutor question packs. And sometimes I only incorporated the mark schemes after completing the question topic packs. Other times I actually incorporated the key marking points from the topic question packs before I actually did them. And this involved me systematically analysing the mark schemes for all the question packs for the topic, trying to identify the key marking points, which I could then incorporate into my flashcards. And the reason why I would sometimes incorporate the key marking points into my flashcards before I actually did the topic question packs was because it meant that I could start learning the marking points earlier on, especially for the describe and explain questions, where the content you would learn from your textbook, but you wouldn't really be able to identify the mark scheme language that you need to include. So that really helped. And with my flashcards, I didn't really do anything fancy with them. For the most part, I tried to keep them as short as possible with one question per flashcard. And for each topic, I tried to ask myself questions that would be similar to the ones that would be asked in exams, which look different for different topics. So for example, when it came to ionization energies, instead of asking myself separate questions on each marking point, what I would do is I would ask myself one large question asking me to explain a trend in ionization energy. And for questions that had really long answers, for example, comparing and contrasting the different structures and properties of different types of ionic compounds or different types of compounds. Another thing I found really helpful was to have one flashcard with the entire really long answer, and then other flashcards that only asked me to recall parts of those answers, which meant that when I was learning the content for the first time, I could learn them in smaller, manageable chunks, rather than trying to memorize an entire paragraph or a couple of paragraphs worth of information, which would have been really overwhelming. So that made learning the content a lot easier. But then once I learned the content, what I could then do is I would have the flashcard that would ask me to recall the entire answer, which would be a great way of testing if I knew all the parts of the answer and could recall them. And if I did get anything wrong, having those separate flashcards for the different parts of those answers meant that each time I got the flashcard wrong, I wouldn't need to recall the entire very long answer every single time, but only had to go over the small parts that I got wrong or forgot. So that saved me a lot of time as well. Something I also found really helpful was for questions like drawing out Hess's or Born-Haber cycles or calculating equilibrium calculations, doing saturation calculations, etc., was having more generalized questions, kind of like recipe sheets that outline the key steps or words I needed to include in these types of questions and in my answers to these types of questions, so that I could get full marks no matter the values or substances they presented me with. For example, I would have, for one of these flashcards, I would have like all the steps I would need to do in order to draw a full marks Born-Haber cycle and not forget anything, the key things I would need to write down, and also for equilibrium calculations, key things like how I would structure my answer and having like the initial moles, the change in moles, the equilibrium moles, and then one for the concentration or other things like that, etc. Another side point as well for calculations, something that our teachers really emphasized that really helped me was to annotate our answers, our calculation answers, and show the examiner that we knew what the different numbers represented, because you need to do that in order to get the marks. Another thing that really helped me with calculations, especially titration calculations and things like that, and application questions, was drawing out the different apparatus, like the different beakers and burettes, labeling them with the substances and numbers, which really helped me visualize and understand what was going on. And once I created my flashcards, what I would do is I would begin reviewing them, and I did this through importing my flashcards into Anki, which is another digital flashcard app that incorporates spaced repetition, and reviewing my flashcards on Anki every single day, my due flashcards. And the way I did this was I just increased the maximum number of due flashcards every single day to the maximum number the app would allow me to, so I would never not be asked something. So that's that. And this really helped me. I really loved Anki because it uses a science-backed algorithm to make it means that if you do stay consistent with doing your flashcards every single day, you won't forget anything. And that provided me with so much confidence and safety, knowing that everything that I did cover and everything that I was doing every single day with my Anki flashcards, I wouldn't forget. And all the work that I did do earlier on in terms of creating my flashcards and understanding the content wouldn't be futile, because I would make sure that I would be able to remember it through Anki. So that really helped me. And reviewing Anki was incredible for me for some other reasons as well. Firstly, it meant that I was able to do some really high quality revision during my hour-long train journeys to and from school, which helped me to make the most out of my time. And secondly, like I mentioned before, doing the flashcards every single day meant that I wouldn't forget what I covered, and all of the work that I was doing wouldn't be futile. So yeah, and that was particularly helpful in year 13, because a lot of the year 13 content builds on the year 12 content, and because I remembered a lot of the year 12 content already, it made it a lot easier for me to understand and learn the new year 13 content as we progress through the course. Now that isn't to say that I was completely on it with my Anki flashcards every single day. I'm human. I make mistakes. During the summer between year 12 and 13, I stopped doing my Anki flashcards completely, which made the first few months of year 13 really difficult for me. More difficult than it needed to be. I did end up catching up though, which made my life a little easier. But yeah, if you start early and do things gradually as you go along, it does make your life a lot easier. And if you can and you do start using Anki, please don't take a really long break from it, because that would make your life a lot more difficult than it needed to be. And now let's move on to the final part of my learning system that helped me get the A star in A-level chemistry, and this was doing exam questions and learning from them. Throughout year 12 and year 13, what this looked like up until A-level exam season was doing the topic question packs from physics and math tutor. And the way I did these was I would do a question, mark my answer, review my answer and figure out where I went wrong, and come up with strategies later to implement moving forward so that I could do better and not make a similar mistake again in the future. And I will go over how I reviewed and learn from my answers in a bit more depth later, but the reason why I did these topic question packs, completing them, reviewing my answers question by question, rather than doing all the questions in one go and then leaving marking and reviewing to the end, was that the questions in A-level chemistry repeat so much, because there's only so much they can really ask you compared to subjects like A-level biology. And so by looking at the mark schemes and reviewing my answers and learning from them question by question, I was not only giving myself the opportunity to discover the key marking points needed to include and the key strategies I needed to implement in my answers, but I was also giving myself the opportunity to begin applying those key marking points and strategies in the answers that I would do to the questions later in the topic question pack. And this really helped me internalize and learn and begin to make habits of including these key marking points and implementing these exam technique strategies that I discovered as I went through the question packs. If I did the entire question packs in one go and then began marking and reviewing my answers at the end, that would probably have deprived me of the opportunity to apply the exam techniques I learned straight away, and it would have made it much more difficult for me to remember those exam techniques because I wasn't applying them. I probably would have also felt a lot less motivated, and I probably wouldn't have properly reviewed my answers as well and figured out how to do better as well, because reviewing all of my answers at the end seemed like a much bigger task than it would have been if I review my answers question by question like I did. So that was what I did up until A-level exam season, which was when I began to complete entire past papers, closed book, full exam conditions, full timing, all that jazz. And the reason why I waited until A-level exam season to do all of these past papers was because firstly, I didn't finish covering all the content before then. So if I did try to do past papers earlier, I wouldn't have been able to answer a lot of the questions, which would have just been a waste of a paper. And secondly, during exam season, it meant that I had enough past papers available left to practice with in the days and weeks before my real exams to get familiar with the paper and improve my confidence. I didn't want to have finished all the past papers in, I don't know, January, February, March, and then be left with nothing to do in the days and weeks before my exams. And what I would do with these past papers, similar to the topic question packs, is I would complete them, take a break, and then actually no, not similar to the topic question packs. What I would do is I would complete the entire past paper, then take a break, then mark the entire past paper and analyze my answers and come up with strategies to implement moving forward. And the way I tracked, analyzed, and came up with these strategies from past papers and topic question packs was very similar. And so let's go through how I did all of those, starting with tracking my progress. For each past paper or topic question pack that I did, what I did was I created a page for it in a Notion database, but you can use whatever works for you. You can use an Excel spreadsheet, a Word document, whatever. But what I had was the name of the paper, the year the paper was from, whether the paper was a paper 1, 2, or 3, the grade that I got, the mark that I got, the A-star mark, the percentage I got, and the A-star percentage, and the date I completed the paper. And similar things for the topic question packs. I just had the name of the topic question pack from PMT. And tracking my progress in this really systematic way and being able to see how my marks were changing as I got more and more practice was really great for me, because it really motivated me to be serious and thorough with how I analyzed my performance in the papers and how I implemented strategies to do better moving forward. And it also forced me to really remember and be brutally honest with myself about how well I was doing or how not well I was doing, which again inspired me to continue to analyze performance and come up with strategies to do better moving forward a lot more seriously. So how did I actually analyze my performance in each past paper or topic question pack that I did? The first part of this that I did was I did a marks analysis, which I learned from Miss Asterisk Biology and Angela Jade from her book, The Only Study Guide You'll Ever Need. And what this involved was creating a tally chart of all the marks that I lost in some key areas, which were maths, M, application, A, reading the question, R, communication, C, knowledge, K, and statements per question, S, which was essentially did I write enough points to get all the marks in the question. And so after marking each paper that I did, or each topic question pack that I did, what I did was I went through all the marks that I lost and I figured out which area that mark belonged to and just added that to the tally chart. And doing this tally chart was really insightful because it helped me visually and concisely communicate which areas I was struggling on the most and were my biggest limiting factors in terms of how well I did in the exam questions for different topics or for past papers overall, which really helped inform what I needed to prioritize in terms of improving my exam technique and what would make the biggest positive difference in my overall performance, on what I should work on. The second part of how I analyzed my past papers and topic question packs was after I did my marks analysis, for every single mark that I lost, I would write down in 4 sentences, I lost this many marks in this area because of XYZ reason. So for example, I lost one read the question mark because I did not round my answer to the correct number of significant figures in the question, and I would also write down the question number just so I could keep track. Or another example is I lost one maths mark because I forgot to apply the correct stoichiometric ratios in this step of my calculation. And then what I would do in a new section of that page is I would turn those 4 sentences talking about the mistakes that I made into 4 sentences talking about the strategies I would implement moving forward to prevent making similar mistakes in the future and do better. So for example, when it comes to rounding my answers correctly, one of the things I wrote was I always highlight the correct number of significant figures the question wants my answer to have before attempting the question, and then after I write my answer, I use my right hand to point to my answer and my pen to point to the number of significant figures highlighted in the question, and cross-check to double-check that they match, and then only then do I move on to the next question. Also, I didn't realize this at first, but you can highlight your answers in your exam papers to help you identify key parts of the questions, etc. You're just not allowed to highlight your answers. So once I realized that, I used the highlighter to help me during all of my exam papers, and I loved it and I never went back. So I'd really recommend doing that or trying it out and see if that works for you too. For marks that I lost in the communication area, what my strategies often looked like was taking the key marking points that I didn't include in my answer and then updating my flashcards to incorporate those key marking points, which I kind of talked about a little bit earlier. And then what I would do after I updated my flashcards, I would reset the due date of those flashcards to be the next day, and then begin memorizing the marking points in that way through doing my flashcards every single day. Other strategies that I came across, just to give a few more examples, was for the long 6-marker questions, I would use subheadings in my answers to have the structure and clear communication to get into the top band for those questions. Another thing was for things like analyzing lots of different spectra, like IR spectra, mass spectra, stuff like that. The different steps I would need to do in every single answer to make sure that I get all the marks. So yeah, and then what I did was for each paper, I got all of this full sentence strategies that I wrote down beforehand, and I summarized them and I put them all into a new document specific to that paper. And that was essentially me creating an exam technique cheat sheet, reminding me of all the exam technique strategies I would need to do and implement to get the A star on the day of the exams. And that was a great way of reminding myself of everything I needed to do and implement to get the A star, which really helped me in exams, I think. And it was a nice way to just go through things before the exams itself on the same day. And doing all of this may seem like a lot, but I think it was one of the biggest reasons I got the A star in both A-level chemistry and A-level biology, because tracking my performance in this way, doing the marks analysis, figuring out in 4 sentences what I did wrong and writing down in 4 sentences what I needed to do better, forced me to be brutally honest about my mistakes and very thorough with how I learned from my past papers, which completely changed the game. Because you can't only improve your exam technique by making mistakes, reflecting on them, learning from them, and implementing strategies to do better next time. And if I didn't have the system, what would have likely happened would be that whenever I did a past paper or topic question pack, would have marked it, found out I didn't really do that well, then not want to look at my answers anymore because it made me feel bad, thinking about how bad I did in the paper, and then do another paper and just have those same marks being lost every single time, and then me feeling bad because I'm kind of stuck in a cycle. So that's not good. That's not fun. So yeah, making mistakes and learning from your mistakes in A-level chemistry and A-level biology when it comes to your past papers and topic question packs is your friend, because that is the only way you can grow and become an A-star A-level chemistry or biology student. So embrace making mistakes and learning from them would be one of my biggest pieces of advice. And you want to make all of those mistakes in your revision up to A-level exam season rather than having to make those mistakes in the pre-exam. So that's that. And then after that, what I did was I just followed my pre-exam routine, which I made a separate video on, and you can find a link to either in the description or the right corner of this video. Now I want to cover a few pieces of miscellaneous advice that I found useful or would have found useful as I went through A-level chemistry. The first piece of advice that really helped me was Revise for your end of topic tests and mock exams like they are the real thing. Do high quality learning and revision from day one, from the beginning, and gradually as you go along, so that you don't have to repeat everything again, which will save you lots of unnecessary time and energy, and it will make your life a lot more easier than if you did things badly the first time round, forgot everything, then had to redo it all again with the time pressure closer towards exams. The second piece of advice that really helped me was when you do your end of topic tests, mock exams, topic question packs, exam papers, aim for 100%. Analyze and learn from your answers as if you're aiming to get 100%, because what that will force you to do is really improve your exam technique and understanding so much, so that just in case in the real exam paper they throw you some really difficult questions, you still have the really high skills and understanding you need to still perform comfortably above the A-star boundary. And this is especially important for OCR-A A-level chemistry, because the exam boundaries, the A-star boundaries is really high. It's usually in the high 80s and 90s, so it's really important. If you find that you're doing your past papers and you reach the A-star boundary and then you just stop reviewing your answers if you consistently get above the A-star boundary, you aren't going to develop the skills and understanding you need to perform well even if the exam is difficult. And there will be a bigger chance that if the exam is difficult, you won't pass the A-star boundary, or the boundary of the grade that you want to get. So that's that. And then thirdly, another piece of advice that really helped me was to be organized. Something that really helped me was I had a chart or a tick sheet that I used to track my progress throughout A-level chemistry, and I had that printed out and something that I could put on my wall and also carry along with me and review every single day. And I initially used like digital trackers, but I just ended up not looking at them every single day, and so they didn't provide me with the urgency and motivation to continue making progress. So I'd recommend printing them out, and that's really helped me a lot. Because if you do that, you'll never lose sight of what you need to do, but you also never lose sight of how far you've come, and both of which will motivate you to continue putting in the work. So for example, for A-level chemistry, what I did was I had a Excel spreadsheet, or I think it was numbers, I don't know, and on the left hand column it had every single subtopic from A-level chemistry, and then also the practicals, and also I also had another one for past papers. And for the content, what I had was I had the subtopic, then next to it I had a column that said pre-study, then a column that said attended the lesson, a column that said made the flashcards, a column that said started reviewing the flashcards, a column that said did all the PMT papers, a column that said marked the PMT papers, a column that said reviewed my answers, a column that said came up with strategies, and a column that said began implementing the strategies. And I had similar ones for the practicals and the past papers. And then as I moved through the course, what I just did was I ticked or highlighted how far along in my learning system I was for these different parts of the specification. And yeah, that just helped me have a really big understanding of where I'm at, what I need to do, what I've done so far, and that really helped me just continue making progress and doing the work. Another thing that helped motivate me was having an exam countdown app on my phone, which told me the number of days until my first exam, which increased the urgency of everything. And what I found was helpful was I used the app Days, and that also had a widget that you could add to your home screen and lock screen, which really helped increase my sense of urgency of making sure I do the work, which helped overcome some procrastination for me. Another thing that really helped increase the urgency for me was I saw from someone else who made a video, I think he was a Cambridge psychology student. What he had was he had a tracker that said the number of weeks until his exams, and thinking about the days until you have your exams in terms of weeks is actually a really scary statistic, because it's a lot fewer than you would think, and that really helped increase the sense of urgency, at least for me when it came to my revision, which helped overcome a lot of procrastination. And yeah, and that is most of what I wanted to say in this video, I guess. Thank you for watching this far. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you, and shout out to my A-level chemistry teachers and everyone else who helped me get the A-star in A-level chemistry. You're incredible, and I wouldn't be here today were it not for all the help and support that you gave me. And as always, in case no one has told you recently, and in case you haven't told yourself recently, I wanted to say that I am proud of you, and I believe in you and your worth and your unlimited potential and your ability to do incredible things in life, including getting the A-star in A-level chemistry. Sending you so much joy and light. Deep.